Shabbat Shalom, Hag Sameach, everyone. The year after I started rabbinical school, my father, who had been a rabbi in St. Louis for over 20 years, decided it was time for a new scene, and he moved to Northern California. And this was a huge blessing for me and my family because my family now was only, and I'm not joking, a quick 7.5-hour ride away from us. And this meant that we, of course, were able to now spend holidays with each other, birthdays, and many fun celebrations. So in 2017, we drove up to Northern California to spend Sukkot with them. It is a trip that I will always remember because of what surrounded it and gave me an eye-opening experience. I remember it was the night we were supposed to return back home to LA, and I was sitting in my father's sukkah. And now, over the years and over the various locations in which I've lived, I've experienced many types of sukkahs. I even joked with Rabbi Drash that I was very excited to see the sukkah here go up because I was curious what it would look like. Now, when I was with my father, we were sitting in that sukkah, and I like to call it a California sukkah. And by that, it is a sukkah made of just light metal rods and a very, very light tarp. And the roof, of course, was made out of bamboo. And my father's sukkah itself was not reinforced to the ground in any way. And I remember sitting in that sukkah that last night saying, wow, this could blow away at any instant. And it made me think back to the sukkah I grew up in that was meant to withstand the harsher elements, with sturdy wood walls, needing to actually hammer and nail things into them to stand, and then, of course, with a very nice, sturdy light overhead. It felt like a little home. After we reminisced about my childhood holiday memories, April and I loaded up the car and drove back to LA, and we crashed for a few hours before our normal workday. When I awoke, I was met with some shocking news. My stepdaughter, Amanda, who lives in the Bay Area, had called us multiple times to inform us that there were fires that had broken out in Northern California, specifically in Santa Rosa, which is where my family lives. I immediately tried to frantically reach my parents, but I heard nothing from them until 12 hours later. And thank God they were safe. But over the coming days, my parents had to evacuate their home, grab only what they really needed and cherished, and pull out of their driveway not knowing if they would have a house to return to. And additionally, my father had informed me that he had 9 congregants who lost their homes that day, lost everything except for what they could put in their cars. After everything settled down and the fires were contained, my father and I would talk about the frightening ordeal. And from our conversations, I have come to understand that realities of dealing with this type of disaster is somewhat actually what the themes of Sukkot and the customs are supposed to teach us. So let's start with the sukkah itself. I shared this Mishnah at the beginning of the holiday, but it's Mishnah Sukkah 1:1, and it says, a sukkah is not permitted to be taller than 20 cubits. Again, not sure how many of you are up to date on ancient measurements, but a cubit is the length from your fingertips down to your elbow, so about 1.5 feet. So we cannot construct a sukkah that is taller than 30 feet. The question then becomes why? Why can we not construct something too tall? The answer is that it gets back to the point of the sukkah. The sukkah is meant to be a dwelling that is temporary, not permanent. I am not a master constructor or builder, but when I consulted April, whose father was a contractor, she did inform me that it would take some serious construction and support to have a 30-foot sukkah that would not topple over itself. If one were to construct this, it most certainly would not look like a temporary dwelling. Yet another question could be asked about the whole construction of the sukkah in general. Why temporary to begin with? Why is this such a critical element? We could tie this to the agricultural component of the holiday and say that these structures were meant to harken back to the huts that farmers would use when they were having to tend to the harvest and were clearly only for seasonal use. Or we could look at the more collective historical approach and say that these dwellings are supposed to be a teaching tool to connect us back to our ancient Israelite relatives. There is a tradition that these sorts of dwellings would be similar to the ones the Israelites traveled in during their 40-year desert journey. However, I would like us to look at the sukkah more metaphorically. The sukkah is a metaphor for us. We are but a temporary dwelling for the soul. Our bodies are supposed to serve the same purpose as the sukkah, as a shelter, as a way to protect from the outward dangers of the world and the environment. But we are here for a limited time, just like the booths of the holiday for the holiday. It makes us aware that we are just fragile beings, just like the sukkah. And with a metaphoric or sometimes real gust of wind or act of nature, we can be gone. Which leads us to another major theme of the holiday, materialism. On page 27a of the Babylonian Talmud Tractate Sukkah, there is a question as to the meaning of the phrase, "You should dwell in the booths for a 7-day period." The discussion is really about trying to define what it means to dwell. Does it mean a certain number of meals? Or does it mean actually living in the sukkah for the period of time? And they go into more and more detail. The general principle is that you should dwell in the sukkah like you dwell in your permanent home. And I can tell you from my time in LA, some people take this very, very literally. People do not simply have a card table and folding chairs, but their entire patio set in their sukkah. I've seen people put full beds in their sukkahs. And I'm not talking air mattresses or rollaways, a full bed frame in their sukkah. And one person even constructed their sukkah around their in-ground hot tub. And while these are clearly nice amenities, I feel like these sort of sukkahs are missing the point. The idea is that we are supposed to remove ourselves from the materialism and, to be honest, the comfort of our home. And just as with Shabbat we try and change our interactions with the world for the day, so too are we intended to do this during the entire holiday of Sukkot. This is a holiday where we truly get to be with nature, to enjoy the splendor of a running river or creek, or to hear the animals that are in our midst, and to truly take in the beauty and glory of God's masterpiece. And to be honest, I think this is why we are supposed to read the book of Kohelet on Sukkot. And as I mentioned, this is my favorite book, but some believe it to be a little bit disheartening or a difficult book to sort of read. But there is a really interesting thing that is said in it, and Rabbi Drash read it earlier. At the beginning of Ecclesiastes, it says, Havel Havalim Amar Kohelet Havel Havalim Hakol Havel. Or futilities of futilities, said Kohelet. Futilities of all futilities, all is futile. What profit does man have from all his labor which he toils beneath the sun? And I am sure there are some of you sitting here confused as to why I find this book to be so beautiful and my favorite in the entire biblical canon. And I understand that on the surface level, it does seem to be a bit of a buzzkill. But when one reads the book in its entirety, they are able to glean out the real message, or one of many messages. Our possessions do not go with us. They are not the things that should bring us eternal happiness, because they cannot. We need to look for the things in this world that are the greatest source of our happiness, those things being our family, our friends, the people and interactions that bring us joy. This allows us to feel a deeper connection to each other and really also to God. And this idea was highlighted by a conversation I had with my father after he had to evacuate his house. He said to me, Micah, in the end, it's just stuff and a building. I have my home with me, and I know you are safe in Los Angeles. That's what I need. While I think this is an idea that we all hold and believe, it is sometimes difficult for us to keep it at the forefront of our minds, especially in a day and age where we always are getting the newest iPhone, which I know just came out yesterday, or the newest car, or constantly inundated with advertisements. It is difficult to hold this idea close to us always. So let this remainder of this holiday of Sukkot be a time where we accept and acknowledge our fragile state as humans, much like my father's California sukkah, and let it be a time where we do not focus on the materials inside our homes and around us, but on the beautiful world in which we are able to live and really make up our true house. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.